Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, as the nation battles with the second wave of COVID-19, the Minister of Health and Social Services last week introduced new measures to control the further spread of COVID-19. These measures, especially the newly introduced curfew, have been questioned by some legal minds, saying that government did not act lawfully. Now, the Minister of Justice, Yvonne Dausab, has spent a lot of time responding through her social media to this issue. This morning, we have invited her to put this matter into perspective. Good morning, Minister, and welcome to GMN.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning to the viewers as well.
Very well. Now, there are some sectors of the Namibian public who are of the opinion that the minister or the newly and new amended measures that are proclaimed by the Minister of Health and Social Services to curb the spread of COVID-19 are unlawful. What do you say to this?
I think it's a complete incorrect interpretation of the total sum of the Public and Environmental Health Act. I do want to clarify, firstly, these measures that we have in place already started on the 17th of September 2020. You'd remember when the state of emergency lapsed, the executive had to make a decision as to whether or not we go back to Parliament and ask for an extension of the state of emergency, or whether or not we have enough safeguards under our ordinary laws that are and have been in existence to deal with the combating and prevention of the coronavirus. So that's the first point. The second thing is, when we established that there was a Public and Environmental Health Act 1 of 2015, we thought that the content of that particular legislation, the important provisions of it being Section 22, Section 28 and Section 29 in particular, to focus on the coronavirus as a public health emergency and as a pandemic. So we did two things. The first thing we did was to operationalize the statute at the time, Act 1 of 2015, something that some of the people who claim that we are acting unlawfully had missed. The second thing that we did is we declared the coronavirus a pandemic, a formidable disease under the provisions of that particular act. So those are the two important things that we did. There is a law in place, and we are acting in accordance with that law. Normally, something that is unlawful has two angles. The one angle is that it's unlawful because there isn't a law in place to address that particular concern. We've made that test. The second part of it is that you act outside the scope of what that particular law provides. Again, I'm of the considered view that that has been met.
Now, some human rights advocates and some learned colleagues actually took on, and they said the minister had no power to instill measures such as a curfew, saying that the Public Health and Environmental Act is not supreme to the Constitution, which guarantees freedom of movement, which is now restricted because of the curfew imposed by 2100 hours.
So anything that has to do with constitutional litigation is always arguable. There's always two sides to a story. This is the story, this is the side of the executive, in that we have looked at particularly Section 29, 1D and Section 29, 1E, that specifically looks at whether or not the minister can restrict the movement of people. Two incidents. The one is that the minister can, like we've seen now, Windhoek is the epicenter of the coronavirus. He could restrict the in and out of movement of people to this particular area if we decide that that would be the appropriate way to respond to it. The other is that he could restrict the movement of people generally. Now, I must tell you also as a lawyer that I can completely see why people would want to argue whether or not this is a violation under Article 21 of the Namibian Constitution. Now, Article 21 sub 2 of the Constitution actually makes provision for reasonable restrictions. And that's only a thing, I suppose, that a court of law can make a declaration on. We have acted, we are acting in a public health emergency. In a democratic society, we are cognizant of the fact that Namibians have rights And we also understand that those rights are not absolute.
Yeah.
There are rights that can be restricted, even under that article in Article 22 that deals with general limitations, that we can restrict if in the view of, in this instance, the executive, we are in the view that the further spread of the virus can be controlled by limiting the movement of people. That's the view that we hold.
Of course, yeah.
So anything else could then be determined by an independent body such as a
yeah.
court.
Now, Honourable, some are saying Parliament was already on holiday when this was passed, and they are saying it was so necessary for them to sit and endorse these measures.
No.
What do you say to that?
Parliament has passed a law.
Yeah.
In 2015, the Namibian Parliament passed a law called the Public and Environmental Health Act 1 of 2015. And under that law, Parliament had actually delegated certain powers to the minister. What now needs to happen, and Namibians need to understand this, is that we are acting in accordance with this law. If there is a challenge, it should be to the existence of this particular law.
Correct.
So this has nothing to do with Parliament. We are not in a state of emergency. I think Namibians need to understand that. I know that the President at the last briefing on 16 December had indicated, if I come back to say anything about the measures, I will declare a state of emergency. But that did not happen. If the President had decided, a decision he doesn't take lightly, if he had decided to declare a state of emergency, what would have happened is for 30 days, even if Parliament is not sitting, that state of emergency would be in effect. And it would lapse after 30 days, and depending on when Parliament sits, Parliament would have then decided whether or not we should extend the state of emergency. So it's still within the prerogative of the President to declare a state of emergency for a period of 30 days.
And we have until the 13th of January for these new measures. Some feel it's too long of a period because some needs to travel back for schools and work and all those. Was it necessary to extend up to the 13th?
I think that's a decision that the Minister of Health takes, having looked at what are the challenges that we're facing in containing the virus. The biggest explanation, or at least one of them, that the Minister had given to us was the fact that, the facilities are being overrun, and that is something that we don't want to see. Namibians must truly take responsibility, individually and collectively, as I always say, to save the lives of all Namibians.